All right, let's turn in our Bibles to the book of Amos, Amos chapter 8. And it's probably the case that most of us like rags to riches sorts of stories where someone who is poor or in relative obscurity is blessed, and through their integrity or their honesty is propelled into riches or influence. You think of Cinderella, right? Cinderella is one of my favorite stories of the Disney ones because she triumphs because of her humility and her ability to not complain or grumble, but just in being generous and gracious, even though everyone treats her bad, right? And then she gets exalted because of her humility. She doesn't fight anyone. She doesn't conquer anything. She just has humility and gentleness and grace. And it's a wonderful rags to riches kind of story. You want to see those kinds of characteristics and traits rewarded. We also happen to like riches to ruins stories, right? Where people who are proud and arrogant, who achieve their great riches through illicit means, they get what's coming to them, and then they're brought low, right? We like both of those kinds of stories. Now, the one that we want to happen to us is usually the rags to riches story and not the riches to ruin kind of story. But here in the Bible, we have examples of both. And in Amos 8, we certainly see that kind of a story take place where those Israelites in the northern kingdom were in such wealth and in such security and comfort, they don't realize that their evilness in achieving those things is going to be recompensed. And that is what Amos in general is about, is the judgment that's coming. Amos 8, we have, once again, a prophecy of judgment. It is given in different movements throughout. And one thing that stood out to me this time is how much poetry there is involved in, or picturesque language that's involved in these judgments. We'll talk about it at the end. But even the way this begins, it's poetic. Amos 8 begins, "This is what the Lord Yahweh." Remember, when we have God all capitalized, that means Yahweh. That's his covenant name. That's the name by which he revealed himself to Moses and to the Israelites in that special relationship. Not everyone gets to call him Yahweh, although everyone will call him Lord. Yahweh is reserved for his people. This is what the Lord Yahweh, so it's emphasizing both God's sovereignty and his personal relationship to Israel, showed me, that is Amos, behold, a basket of summer fruit. He said, "Amos, what do you see?" And I said, "A basket of summer fruit." Then Yahweh said to me, "The end has come upon my people Israel. I will never again pass by them. The songs of the temple shall become wailings in that day, declares the Lord Yahweh. So many dead bodies. They are thrown everywhere. Silence." What is happening here? Why is Amos shown a basket of summer fruits? These would have probably been things like grapes and figs. And if you remember, Amos was a keeper of sycamore trees, and sycamore figs, they do bear fruit in the summer. It's the last of the harvest. So it's kind of like the very end of the harvesting season would be these fruits. Now, there's an interesting wordplay. We don't see it in English. I try to think of a way to make this work in English, but I'll tell it to you in Hebrew, and then you can, if you can think of a clever way to bring it into English, this wordplay. But the word for summer fruit is chayitz, all right, chayitz. The word for the end, so the summer fruit there, the word for the end is chitz. So chayitz is summer fruit, and hachitz would be the end. And they sound kind of similar, right? So there's a word play. The reason that God is showing Amos fruits is to picture the Israelites as this late basket of fruits about to be harvested. Now, the irony is that A ripened harvest is good news, right? This is something to celebrate. This is the last harvest. You're going to bring it in, and you're going to enjoy the fruits of your labors until the next, growing season and planting season. So you look forward to it. Sometimes there's festivals involved with the harvest season. But this is a harvest of judgment. Their evil deeds, their wickedness, in a way, have made them plump and ready for what? Not for feasting, but for lamenting, for wailing. This is akin to the language of Revelation 14, 17 through 20. Then another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, the angel who has authority over the fire. And he called with a loud voice to the one who had the sharp sickle, "Put in your sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe." So the angel swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grape harvest of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia. Similar language. Again, Revelation, this is happening in the context of the Great Tribulation, when a worldwide judgment is unfolding as God finally brings upon the world the judgment that everyone's clamoring for, right? Oh, why isn't there justice on the earth? There's no justice here. Christians, non-Christians, always clamoring for justice. It seems like the evil and the wicked get away with it, but really, like we saw this morning, we're calling judgment on ourselves. And the time of the tribulation is such a destructive time. And what is the picture? It's a picture of all of these grapes on a vine, just ripe, ready to be harvested and put into the winepress. So if you, this is not good theology, but mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And it talks about the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. Like, he was talking about battle. He's talking about, war that's happening here on earth. He did not see this day. Right? He did not see the grapes of wrath being poured out, because this is a kind of destruction and level of worldwide cataclysm that would make whatever, I forgot who wrote Battle Hymn of the Republic. Steinbeck? Is he the grapes of wrath, but the song, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, I forgot who wrote it. Huh?
The song, I can't remember the name, it's a Civil War song.
Yeah.
John Brown.
Yeah.
John Brown is a true.
Yeah. The point being, like,
The poem was written by Julia Ward Howe.
Okay, well, the horrors of the Civil War are going to be nothing, right? It's going to be Saturday morning cartoons compared to the destruction of the Great Tribulation. Whoever wrote that and whoever sung that, they'd never seen the wrath that is coming upon the earth, that is here pictured like these grapes. And then we see the imagery go very quickly from wine, or the grape juice being pressed, which would look like blood, to blood. And the picture of it being this tidal wave, practically, of blood outside of the holy city. Harvest analogies, agricultural pictures, hard for us. Again, we're not accustomed to that. Even when folks are kind enough to bring in the hulls from their gardens at home around here, there's nothing in comparison to if your society is based around agriculture. So this is very vivid imagery for them, and it's not happy imagery. The songs that are usually associated with celebration will become songs of lamentation. The harvest time and the feasting is going to be turned into mourning and then silence. Remember the significance here, the title of the Lord Yahweh, but when he talks to Amos, oftentimes it switches back to Yahweh. He says, God's not mad at Amos. So Yahweh said to me, but then it's back to the Lord Yahweh, the sovereign covenant-keeping God who is bringing judgment. And we have just some stark words. Oftentimes there's poetry and vivid imagery and playing up metaphors and everything, but these last phrases, very just stark, simple in Hebrew as well. Just many dead bodies cast everywhere, And then silence is the word has, which is almost like hush, like when we say hush or shh. It's like that. It sounds the same, right? Has. It's just stark death, destruction. It's not played up or anything like that. Versus, this is kind of this vivid imagery. This is just bodies everywhere and quietness because everybody's dead. This is the judgment of God that is coming for the Israelites. The harvest is made ready, and the harvester stands with his sickle ready to swing it into their presence. Well, why? Well, we've talked about it already so many times, and here it's just reiterating again what we've seen over and over again. Hear this, you who trample on the needy and bring the poor of the land to an end, saying, when will the new moon be over, that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath, that we may offer wheat for sale, that we may make the ephah small and the shekel great, and deal bountifully with false balances, that we may buy the poor for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals, and sell the chaff of the wheat. So this section here is now from the perspective of the Israelites, of course. Why is this judgment coming? And God lets them speak for themselves, so to speak. They're going to incriminate themselves. They should have pleaded the fifth, but instead they say out loud what their hearts want. And this, again, revisiting of so many of the same themes we've seen of oppressing the poor and making money off of them, taking exorbitant interest, and all these things that we saw. We talked about it already, but what does this mean? When will the new moon be over that we may sell grain? Remember, Israelites ran off of a lunar calendar, so the new moon began the new month. So the beginning of the month is a new moon. But what would happen at the beginning is a lot of offerings. This is Numbers 20:11 through 15. At the beginning of your months, you shall offer a burnt offering to Yahweh. 2 bulls from your herd, 1 ram, 7 male lambs, a year old without blemish. Also 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour for a grain offering mixed with oil for each bull, and 2/10 of fine flour for grain offerings mixed with oil for the 1 ram, and 1/10 of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering for every lamb, for a burnt offering with a pleasing aroma of food offering to Yahweh. The drink offering shall be half a hin of wine for a bull, a third of a hin for a ram, and a quarter of a hin for a lamb, or a ram for a lamb. This is the burnt offering of each month throughout the months of the year. Also 1 male goat for a sin offering to Yahweh. It shall be offered besides the regular burnt offering and its drink offering. So at the beginning of the month was often associated with sacrifices, right? And so what is happening is that it's like, when is all the, I got to make sacrifices at the beginning of every month. When do I get to make that money back? I need to make it back, right? It's an eagerness to get through all the sacrificial stuff so I can get back to making money. Same with the Sabbath, and the Sabbath that we may offer wheat for sale because, of course, on the Sabbath, they did no work. So they're always eager to get back to making money, which really means to get back to oppressing the poor and their sinful attitudes of greed and selfishness. We have the first example of shrinkflation here. We make the ephah small and the shekel great. What does that mean? The ephah is like a measurement of flour. So give them smaller portions but charge more for it, right? It's shrinkflation, right? Or what we call now shrinkflation. The way they did that is by dealing deceitfully with the balances. So they didn't have money that you'd count, you'd weigh it. And so you'd weigh out money, and you'd weigh out the wheat. So you basically use one set of weights that are going to make it seem like you're getting, or you use one set of weights for the wheat, right? That says it's a pound, but really it's like 3/4 of a pound, right? So you sell them less wheat, but then when you weigh out the money, right, you use like, instead of a pound, you use like a 2-pound weight, and so they pay you double, right? Paying more for less. It's that kind of idea, which, of course, we're still somewhat familiar with even these days. Just consider how much of God's judgment is coming upon the Israelites that has to do with money and greed. And we've already talked about it. I won't belabor the point. But money is such a temptation. Paul told Timothy, beware of money, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Jesus said it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. So many verses, Proverbs that we've gone through in men's breakfast, so many of them have to do with money and our relationship to money. How easily we can get caught up with the thought that if we have more money, our problems will be solved. If we have more money, perhaps we could even bribe God. But this is a wrong thinking. This is a wrong attitude. For the Lord hates unjust weights. The Lord hates the oppression of the poor, often telling them, don't mistreat the poor because you were poor once too in Egypt. You were slaves. You have the attitude that they could buy the poor for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals and sell the chaff of the wheat. The chaff of the wheat is a leftover part, all right? It's the part that you don't want. It's not the grain, it's the husks. And it's just, again, this attitude that you can buy justice for silver. Remember, you could bribe the judges. We saw that in Amos 2:6. The accusation is they're paying off judges to get unjust settlements against the poor. You have enough money, and you can oppress them. They would abuse them, giving basic needs, selling them basic needs at exorbitant costs. And these sorts of behaviors and attitudes, which anyone, rightfully, we probably read that and say, yes, of course, so unjust. But watch out for the sin of greed in your own hearts and lives, because it can happen so quickly. One of the things that is on the rise is gambling amongst young people. I don't know, I didn't count, but so many ads during the Super Bowl, I think, were gambling related. So many young people are on gambling apps. It's even in games now. It's sort of subtly incorporated in there. And so in Europe, there's a lot of video games that are going to be scrutinized, that you can't sell them to minors because they have gambling mechanics for some of their transactions. Like, oh, you want this special skin, you have to buy loot boxes, and you have a 1% chance of getting it, and it's encouraging these kids to gamble. A society that is driven by money like that, with the wrong attitudes towards money, is a nation that is going to implode, if not face the judgment of God. And that's certainly what happens here. They're not to be like this. They're to be generous. They're to be giving. Israel was to be like a city on a hill that was to be an example to them all. But instead, they fell into the same kinds of greed, same kinds of worldly attitudes that everyone else was in. Get while the getting's good. Get as much as you can. Make everything, do anything to get everything. Just this wrong attitude, and we see that here. This is what has prepared them for the judgment. And the harvester is coming. Verse 7 tells us, Yahweh has sworn by the pride of Jacob, surely I will never forget any of their deeds. Shall not the land tremble on this account, and everyone mourn who dwells in it, and all of it rise like the Nile and be tossed about and sink again like the Nile of Egypt. The harvester is going to come, and we're going to see a bunch of I will statements here. And on that day declares the Lord Yahweh, I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight. I will turn your feasts into mourning and all your songs into lamentation. I will bring sackcloth on every waist and baldness on every head. I will make it like the morning for an only son, and the end of it like a bitter day. The harvester is coming. He's personally invested in this. The Lord Yahweh, again, Lord is absolute sovereign. Yahweh is the covenant keeper, God. Part of Yahweh's covenant-keeping nature, his personal nature to Israel, was that he would bring judgment against them if they broke his laws and commands as the sovereign. What else can he do? Can he just let them continue on in their sin and destructive behavior without consequence? Yahweh has sworn, this is ironic, by the pride of Jacob. Surely I will never forget any of their deeds. And yet Amos 6:8 says, the Lord Yahweh has sworn by himself, declares Yahweh, the God of hosts, I abhor the pride of Jacob and hate his strongholds, and I'll deliver up the city and all that is in it. But here's Yahweh is sworn by the pride of Jacob. Well, what's going on here? It's again kind of a word play. In Amos 6:8, the Lord swears by himself, because what higher thing? You swear by something greater than yourself, right? Like when you make a promise, you're making an oath based on some power or some authority greater than your own to hold you into account. So is there any higher authority than God himself? No. So of course, who does God swear by? Himself. When he talks about the pride of Jacob here, he's talking about Jacob's pride or Israel's pride in themselves. Who are they supposed to have as their pride? God. So that's the wordplay. Yahweh has sworn by the pride of Jacob. Who is the pride of Jacob? Himself. He should be their pride. So the Lord has sworn by himself. So they're not, this is not a conflict. In both cases, Yahweh is always swearing by himself because there's no other higher authority. But in Amos 6:8, he is saying, your pride is in yourself rather than me. I should be your pride. Who should get their allegiance? Who is the ultimate authority? It should be him, and yet they neglect him, and so God promises, but I will not neglect you. I'm never going to forget your sins then if you reject me. You think by forgetting me I will forget you? No. I'm the covenant-keeping God. I will hold you into account. We have, again, some interesting imagery here. Shall not the land tremble on this account, and everyone mourn who dwells in it, and all of it rise like the Nile, and be tossed about, and sink again like the Nile of Egypt? Well, if you know anything about Egypt, the Nile floods every year to provide water and fertile soil to the valley, and it's central to Egypt's culture and their existence. Like, you don't have this nation of Egypt without this very famous annual flooding of the Nile, and then it retracts, and it's a symbol of prosperity and abundance. But like the summer fruits, God is ironically using it as a symbol of judgment and destruction. That if Israel were to flood like the Nile did every year, it would destroy it, not be a source of prosperity. They would, flounder around. You just imagine if a flood suddenly came in and just washed out all of their villages and towns, this great rush of water. Egypt is prepared for it. They need it. Israel's not. In the same way, huh?
Israel?
I mean, they have water sources, yes, but they're not dependent on the flooding of their lands like Egypt is. So if such a flood were to happen there, it would be destruction. That's the point. It would. It's like flushing them down the toilet. Is maybe a modern day image for us. On that day, he says, declares the Lord Yahweh, I'll make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight. This day is the day when the Assyrians would come and lay siege and destroy Israel and scatter them, 722 BC. Remember, Assyria, 722, northern kingdom. 586 BC, southern kingdom of Judah, Babylon. If you want to remember any dates, those are good ones to remember. And this sounds kind of like an eclipse or some other sign of the heavens. But there is precedence for this kind of thing to be a figure of speech, basically signifying a day of great gloom and judgment. In other words, this doesn't have to necessarily be a darkening of the middle of the day. You look at Jeremiah 15:9. I meant to have a slide of that, but Jeremiah 15:9, similar kind of imagery is used for judgment. Well, that's not right. Oh, yeah, okay. She who bore 7 has grown feeble. She has fainted away. Her son went down while it was yet day. She has been shamed and disgraced, and the rest of them I will give to the sword before their enemies. So this is the judgment on Jerusalem, 586 BC by the Babylonians. And it's pictured as a woman who is under judgment, and it's as if the sun has gone down while it was yet day. That's poetic language. It's not that literally 586 BC, the sun, there's any astronomical event. So some people try to correlate this to, say, Revelation, when there's all these spectacular astronomical events. But it's just saying that this is a day of gloom and judgment, as if in the middle of the day the sun were just to stop shining. It's reflecting, the weather is reflecting the darkness of the land and the judgment that's coming upon it. Huh? Yes, that literally did happen, where there's darkness during the day. But it doesn't necessarily say that it was, we talked about that another time. It doesn't say that was an eclipse or anything like that. It's just supernatural darkness. And it might have just been over Jerusalem. It doesn't say that, could have just been a cloud, right? Like it's a supernatural, cloud, but it doesn't have to mean that the sun dropped out of the sky or anything like that. And that's likely not what's happening here either. It's just a statement that the disaster that's coming upon it is as stark and dark as if the sun were to just drop out of the sky in the middle of the noonday. That's the idea. Now, of course, it is true that many times in the prophets, when they speak of near-term judgment like this, as coming, it's coming soon, that sometimes they'll pivot right to the tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble. I don't think it's necessarily one of those occasions, but if it is, there's this idea in the Old Testament, anytime there's talk of judgment, it's always like a sneak preview of the day of the Lord, when we will have that worldwide catastrophe on all the nations for their sin. So every time you do see a nation being judged, whether it's Israel or whether it's Babylon or any of the other nations that were described at the beginning of Amos, it's always a sneak preview. It's always a precursor. It's always this echo of this great judgment that's coming at the end of time. So the prophets can go right back and forth between near-term judgment and end times judgment. This may or may not be one of those cases. Anyway, the picture is the unexpected nature of this judgment, because it's always this theme of it should be a time of feasting, it should be a time of rejoicing, it should be a time of celebration, and then just like that, the feast turns into mourning, the songs into lamentation, sackcloth on the waist, baldness on every head. Sometimes as a sign of mourning, they would shave their heads. So that's not supernatural. Your hair just falls out. It's an expression of grief and mourning. Baldness is not necessarily judgment for whoever needs that. This is... This is just like you'd put sackcloth on, you are willingly as an expression. So this is preparing for a birthday party, only for it to turn into a funeral. It's just that contrast. So do the Israelites expect the harvester to come? No, they don't. That's their folly. Is they're carrying on as if there's nothing wrong, that nothing is the matter. But should they have known? Yes. They should have known, because God was not silent. Here's what he says. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord Yahweh, when I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of Yahweh. They shall wander from sea to sea and from north to east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of Yahweh, but they shall not find it. In that day, the lovely virgins and the young men shall faint for thirst. In other words, they're actually having a very prosperous time. Remember, Israel is in a time of comfort. Things are seeming to go well. But what are they bereft of? They're bereft of the word of the Lord. Now, on the one hand, at that time, the prophets are speaking to them, like Amos. They're not robbed of it at that moment. There's not a famine of it at that moment, because there are prophets speaking to the coming judgment. But when they finally seem to get it, the judgment is coming, right at the very last second. No, wait. What did you say, God? What did you say we should do? That is the moment when there will be silence. Why? Because it's too late. The point of this passage is it will be too late at that point. The judgment, or the die has been cast, and it'll be far too late for them to start trying to seek the Lord. In a way, it's saying that I don't even know if it's an earnest seeking. Because if they cared, they should have cared much earlier. It's like, when you tell your kids to do something or else there's going to be a consequence. And then they don't do it, they don't do it. And you say, all right, here comes the consequence. They say, no, what did you say again? I'll do it now. No, it's too late. It's not as if you didn't hear. It's not as if you didn't have the word. You had it. You had it from the time of Deuteronomy. You had the Moses and the prophets, even well before, hundreds of years before. You were deaf to it. And now, at the moment when the judgment is coming, you pretend like you want to listen to God. That is the very moment where you'll have none of it because it's too late. Be famine in the land of the word of God. Yes?
What's the significance of north? You see me go north and east, like going to Syria or something?
So the sea is to the west, right? So the only directions you can really go are north and east. The south is just desert. So the only places that you can go in Israel for north and east.
No, north to east.
I know, it's like saying from this direction and that direction. It's not like go north and then east. It's just like you're going to go to the north, you're going to go to the east, and you're going to find nothing. So don't see it as directions. It's just an expression. You could say from sea to sea, it's like that. From sea to sea, from north to east. It's not go north and then east. Just like it's not like go from this sea to that sea. It's just saying it's an expression of the expanse of where they're going to go looking, and you'll find nothing. So.
Before John was playing, he's testing the sound, shout to the Lord. I'm like, shout to the north and south. Basically, go north and go south. And then you sing the east and west, but you never stop.
It's just literary devices. It's not literal. It's not literal. It's a rhetorical device. I know. I appreciate your geography-centric mind, but in this case, it's rhetorical. It's just the idea. You're going to scramble, looking everywhere you can, but it doesn't matter where you look. In one sense, it doesn't matter where you look because they already have it. Where do you need to look when it's already been recorded for you? This echoes the sentiment that we see in the parable, the rich man and Lazarus. Remember rich man and Lazarus? Lazarus is a poor man. He dies, he goes into Abraham's bosom, and then the rich man who's nameless, he basically goes to hell, he goes to judgment. And at first, it's like, Lazarus, Abraham, can you ask Lazarus to bring me some water? It's like, no. And then he realizes, okay, well, my brothers, I do not want them to end up here. So can you send Lazarus to warn them about this place? But Abraham responds to him. Here we pick up, they have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. And he, the rich man, said, no, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. He said to him, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. Now, obviously, there's a statement there, like, people still reject Jesus. So what's the problem here? It's not the lack of information. It's a lack of a heart condition. Even Jesus thought at that moment, all they needed to do was believe what Moses and the prophets had said. And it's the same thing. This is, 700-800 BC, so, several hundred years before Jesus. And Amos is saying the same thing. You're going to look for the word, but there's a famine as far as the prophets are concerned. But you know what they still have? Moses and the Pentateuch. They still have Joshua and Judges, and they still have much scripture. That's all they need. So this is not that God is lacking in giving them revelation. It's more a statement about they're looking, but the doom has already come, and part of that is going to be that no more prophets, no more Yahweh coming to speak to them mourning. That day is gone. And so there's a famine for the word. They lacked this deep desire, not to just hear it. They heard it. Amos talked to them. We saw it last time, right, in Amos 7, where he has the discussion with Amaziah, the priest of Bethel. So the people, the right people, heard the message. The king certainly knew what Amos was preaching. They heard it. They did not believe it. Many go to church. They hear it, but they don't believe it. That is the rebuke. Their hearts are not right with the Lord. And so we see that ultimately that they are idol worshipers to the end. Verse 14. Those who swear by the guilt of Samaria and say, as your God lives, O Dan, and as the way of Beersheba lives, they shall fall and never rise again. And each one of these little phrases is a picture of their idol worship. Those who swear by the guilt of Samaria, or I think some translation maybe the shame of Samaria. You have the guilt or the shame of Samaria versus the pride of Jacob. So they're choosing guilt instead of trust in the Lord. They're choosing the gods of Dan instead of the living God. Remember, Jeroboam had set up a golden calf at Dan to worship. And that was an expression that would say, as your God lives, and they would worship this idol, or they would swear or make oaths. And yet, a golden calf doesn't have any life in it. Did it ever move or live or breathe on their behalf? No. But Yahweh lives. 1 Kings 17:1, Elijah the Tishbite said to Ahab, as Yahweh, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. So often the prophets said, as Yahweh lives, because he is the actual living God. You swear and make oaths based on a living God, because only a living God can hold you accountable to the oath that you made. Dead people can't hold you accountable, nor can these non-living gods. As the way of Beersheba lives, they say. The guilt of Samaria, as your God lives, O Dan, referencing the golden calf. As the way of Beersheba lives. These are expressions of their idol worship. And the way of Beersheba, if you remember, that was in Judah. So we saw that before earlier in Amos, how they would sometimes, even as a show of their religiosity, go all the way down to Judah, which they're sometimes in conflict with, to worship at Beersheba. But they made this pilgrimage to worship not in Jerusalem at the temple where God ordained, but to this city where there was idol worships. So they bothered to go all the way down just to make a trip to worship some more idols. It's ironic because the way that they are supposed to live was described so long beforehand. The way of the Lord, Deuteronomy 5:33, you shall walk in all the way that Yahweh your God has commanded you, that you may live, and that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land that you shall possess. There is only the way of Yahweh. Every other way leads to death and destruction. The paths that God had called them to were not make this journey, make this pilgrimage. They aren't necessarily a physical path that they need to go, or even a physical place to be. Even as Jesus told the woman at the well in John 4, neither on this mountain nor that mountain shall you worship. But the Father is seeking those who worship in spirit and in truth. It's not a locational thing or a journey thing. Our call to walk the way of Yahweh is about our hearts. It's about that internal, spiritual journey of following Christ, denying ourselves, picking up our cross daily for his sake and the gospel's sake. He is the way. Now, he said, those who did this, they shall fall and never rise again. And of course, that generation of Israelites who suffered the Assyrian conquest, they were scattered, nearly wiped out. To this day, those tribes, those 10 tribes, in diaspora, all spread throughout the world. But not all is lost, because God had promised to gather them together. Deuteronomy 30, 1 through 5. And when all these things come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before you, and you call them to mind among all the nations where Yahweh your God has driven you, and return to Yahweh your God, you and your children, and obey his voice, and all that I command you today with all your heart, with all your soul, then Yahweh your God will restore your fortunes and have mercy on you. And he will gather you again from all the peoples where Yahweh your God has scattered you. If your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there Yahweh will gather you, and from there he will take you. And Yahweh your God will bring you into the land that your fathers possessed, that you may possess it, and he'll make you more prosperous and numerous than your fathers. Jeremiah 4, 1 through 2. If you return, O Israel, declares Yahweh, to me you should return. If you remove your detestable things from my presence and do not waver, and if you swear, as Yahweh lives, in truth, in justice, and in righteousness, then nations shall bless themselves in him, and in him shall they glory. They had it all messed up. They were supposed to be the ones who worshiped God in truth and justice and in righteousness, and the nations would then bless God. And instead, they went after the gods of those other nations so that God himself would have to come against them and scatter them and judge them. It's the exact opposite of what God had intended. And yet, God had purposed it and promised to regather and restore. Ultimately, their judgment points to Jesus. What they need is a Savior from themselves. What they need is Jesus, who said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He is the way, the true way of Beersheba. He is the living one, not Dan, the idols at Dan. He is the truth, that there is no shame or condemnation in Christ, unlike the guilt of Samaria. Jesus came to fulfill God's promises that he made, not only to Moses and the Israelites in Deuteronomy 30, all the way back to Genesis 3, when he promised the woman that in your seed, the head of the serpent will be crushed, and the family's blessed. Jesus is the one to whom all of these scriptures must point, because he is God and man. He is the perfect servant and sacrifice, as well as the glorious King and sovereign of all. He's gracious and humble and righteous and holy. He's all that we need, wrapped up in one. Every time you read about these judgment passages, and I know sometimes they can I remember as a kid reading judgment passages, and especially kind of these poetic sorts of pictures of summer fruit and all these things. I got lost. It didn't make sense to me. But I realize as I get older, the reason that God uses poetry and word pictures is actually the opposite of trying to obfuscate and make things less clear. Because if I was growing up in Israel, a basket of summer fruit would have been a very easy analogy to make. And all these pictures would have made a lot more sense to me with ephahs of flour and shekels and weights and all these things. It was meant to be, to the original audience, very clear kinds of pictures of what pleases God and what offends God. So part of it was I needed to be taught those sorts of things. Part of it because I didn't have the context of that. But no one likes to read about judgment, except when, again, you like the rags to riches and the riches to ruin stories, when it's you who are the rags to riches, and when it's someone else, when it's the riches to ruin. But we have something to learn from both pictures. Do we deserve to be exalted with Christ, to rule and reign together with him? Is anyone here? Raise your hand. Yeah. Is anyone like James and John? I know you got a couple spots to the left and right of you in your kingdom. I'm just going to throw my name out there. If you're taking considerations, have your mom come in and say, boy, that's embarrassing. If I was James and John, because they're adults, right? And their mom goes up, my boys, they're good boys. I think they'd make great left and right hand men. No, none of us deserve that exaltation. That is our glory, though, and our hope. We don't like the riches to ruin stories if it's us, but we need to remember them because none of us is above sinning. None of us is above forgetting at times who the Lord is in our own hearts. We need to hold those stories dear, not as it's so fun to see other people get their comeuppance, but to be on guard for our own hearts. Paul told Timothy, watch your doctrine and your life closely, for by them you will save yourself and your hearers. You need to watch your life closely, not just your doctrine. Riches to ruin stories, it's not so much about money, but it is about, for probably most of us, about our ego and pride. Not that we have a lot of money per se, but a lot of us are full of ourselves. And we need to be on guard lest the Lord notice and humble us and bring us down his way. Better for you to humble yourself before the Lord. So, any questions or comments as we finish up Amos 8 here? Yes, Victor.
So, you're talking about the harvester.
Yes.
Does it remind you that the grim reaper comes with sickness? So he's the harvester.
Well, it's not. The imagery of harvesting, like as judgment, a symbol of judgment. I mean, that's not just the Bible. Like a lot of cultures have that idea, and so I don't know if the grim reaper came out of like a Judeo-Christian concept of death or anything like that, but certainly the idea of like the dead being harvested. I mean, you see that in a lot of different cultures.
I think the image of the Grim Reaper came from Renaissance England.
Okay.
There's a great tradition of allegorizing different ideas by drawing them as human figures.
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, but I bet you can find it like Asian cultures and stuff as well. The idea of like, death harvesting, souls of people and stuff. I don't know. It seems, again, a lot of cultures and civilizations very agricultural back in the day, so it would have been very near analogies to make. It's not as familiar to us these days. Yes, Alan?
Talk about the harvest thing and the last harvest. We eat fruits for the last 40 years. The first harvest sucks, the last one sucks too. It's the middle of it. You eat the last year, they're like, forget it. No, seriously, they're like bad.
But have you been to Israel and experienced it before? You had all of this GMOs and all, the industrialized farming. I mean, again, we're living at a much different age.
I'm thinking about that, but what's the last
No.
harvest anyway?
Yeah, Rick. So Isaiah is, I think, after Amos. Yeah, and then Amos is like 800s to 700s BC-ish. Yeah, so they're not exactly sure, but I want to say Isaiah is a little later because he's talking to Judah and their pending destruction. So I think a little later. I don't know. They might have overlapped. It really depends on if Amos was written later, like closer to the time of Assyria's judgment. But no, he says, I'm sorry. No, there's a time markers. It was the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and the days of Jeroboam. So that, I have a slide. Let me see. Okay. Here's Amos down here. Oh, yeah, maybe they were more contemporaneous than I thought.
All within about 80 years.
Let's see. Possibly, 750 BC. Oh, yeah, because No, Isaiah starts off in the days of King Uzziah, right? You caught me with my pants down here as far as my prophet, prophet chronology. Yeah, right? Doesn't Isaiah begin like that? Yeah, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. So I guess they were contemporaneous. Yeah, around the same time. Good call. Yeah, and remember famous Isaiah 6, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up. Train of his robe filled the temple with glory. Isaiah 6. So, yeah. But one in the north, Isaiah in the south. So, very good.